audience. No offense to staff who have joined us. The non-usual suspects. Okay, got the thumbs up from Derek. We're all set. Welcome, everybody. This is the Monday, August 23rd special meeting of the Wethersfield Town Council. Mr. Deputy Mayor, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Sue. If you don't mind, take the attendance.
Councillor Biggs?
Present.
Councillor Flanagan?
Here.
Councillor Forrest? Councillor Hill?
Here.
Councillor O'Connor?
Here.
Councillor Pelletier?
Here.
Councillor Pentelo?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Mazzarella?
Here.
Mayor Rell?
Here. Thank you, Sue. Just a reminder, I think I mentioned this at the last council meeting, because we are wearing masks, those that are speaking, please speak directly into the microphone just so that the audio can pick us up. And maybe Gary, the town manager, will talk a little bit later on some COVID updates, but I believe that this is the last of the in-person meetings here at Town Hall for this council. Regrettably, we are going to go back into Zoom meetings from the comfort of our own homes, but behind the screens that we have to do these meetings remotely. Hopefully this is short-lived and we will be back to normal as quick as possible, heeding all the recommendations of not only the governor, the CDC, as well as the Central Connecticut Health District. If we do our best, we can put this behind us, hopefully, and be back in person. With that, there are a couple council action items tonight. The first one is a replacement of the, I guess it's section D of the Highcrest Elementary School. Sally Katz is here to give us an explanation of that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in to discuss this. Highcrest School has a number of different roofs as part of the entire school. The section of roof that I have come to you tonight is the roof that is over the cafeteria. This is a roof that is exceptionally old, has given us a number of problems since I started to work with the schools. It has a long history of leaks, of patches, of patching the leaks. Starting with CIP, we had put in requests to start putting money toward being able to replace the roof sections. Once the budget had passed, we worked with Tremco, who is our roofing consultant, and the buying collective that we belong to put together a pricing program for the 4 roofs that we had wanted to get done. Due to COVID, due to supply chains, due to some other scheduling issues, the one roof that really needs to be replaced now is roof D. We were lucky enough to be able to not only get the lowest bidder, but the lowest bidder who has product on site and will be able to do this job in a very short amount of time. It will, if approved tonight, be able to start this week. It will bleed in a couple of days past the time that students come back, but we're working with the superintendent and the principal of the school that if it is approved tonight, that we are going to work around those minor inconveniences for a couple of days in order to be able to have the new roof over this section where it really is, it's just deteriorated horribly. And every time it rains, we get significant damage inside just because the roof has completely disintegrated. We had hoped originally to be able to do more roofs, but with timing and supply chain and everything else. So while you will see that roof D, you'll see on the plans that there were actually more roofs. If nothing else, that will give us an indication of what we are looking for pricing when we pursue this more and more in the years to come. So I am here tonight to request funding to go to Imperial Roofing in the amount of $114,700. They were the lowest bidder. They are available. They are ready to go. And with that,
Open it up to questions. Any questions for Sally? Mr. Deputy Mayor?
I have several, Sally. Do you think the price of the material is inflated because of the current situation? I thought the price per square foot seemed awfully high. I'm not familiar with this particular type of roof, but membrane roof that I recently replaced was significantly less, but it was pre-COVID, so I'm wondering if it's a material shortage price problem.
it's not significantly higher. We did get a price last year, just as a, again, give us some ballpark figures. And they came in actually slightly higher than this from the vendors that, again, that was back of the envelope kind of thing. So it is in realm. There might be a slight markup because of COVID, but again, this contractor has product on site.
Do we know if that's an original roof, that section?
It's not original to the building, but it is over 25, 30 years old.
Okay.
The building was built in the 70s.
And did they, how did we spec out that type of roof? And
We
the
worked
reason
with-
I'm asking is because, we're planning to replace that school at some point in time. The system that they're installing seems like a very significant multi-layered system,
Yes.
as opposed to just a membrane roof. And I'm wondering if we couldn't get 20 years out of a membrane roof for significantly less money.
We go, first of all, we work with Tremco and our roofing consultants to put together what is the a well-rated roof for installation, and also to get 20 years out of it, because that particular roof also, or many of the roofs, do take a lot of damage, as you know, with winds and everything else. We would need to make sure that we have the layers of the roof to be able to get that insulation, to be able to be pitched properly. And so we went to the experts and said, put together the spec for us. In the initial plan that I know that the Board of Ed has been working on, Highcrest is going to be used for quite a while. And so, when I look at replacing a roof, I look at a 20-year roof, a roofing system, one that could handle a lot of water. It can handle, having leaves and everything else up there with maintenance to it. But again, we also look at what is the R values for the roofs to be able to make sure that we get, the insulation that we want. As we move forward also, and we potentially have the possibility of doing entire schools, then we also need to use this type of a roofing system for the state if we should attempt to go for any type of reimbursements.
Okay.
And that's why we work with Tremco, because they're very well-versed in working in that arena.
And just a couple more, don't mean to be a pain, but
That's okay.
is the roofing system, is it a Tremco product, or do you know if it's?
They use some Tremco products. Omnia, which is the buying collective, isn't just, Tremco, but all of the bidders bid using those products, because that's who we have our maintenance with, and the warranties with.
And the reason for the question is having to do with the inspection of the installation. And we use Tremco. I don't know if it's a different name, but they're our inspector.
Yes.
And I would almost rather have an independent party do the inspection of this installation. I don't know if that's possible, or,
Well, we don't have, the person who is our Tremco rep, Mike Boudreau, isn't the person from Tremco who would be doing it. He has a part of this, but then we also use, we do inspections with the company. We haven't in the past brought in a third-party inspector, mainly due to additional costs. But they do have.
That's in the bid spec.
Yeah, they do have to sign off on it. And Tremco, there are other people who work for Tremco who don't work on our accounts that I can discuss with Mike Boudreau and get another set of eyes on there.
I'm just thinking down the road, if there is a problem, and now we're going to be negotiating a problem with the same company that did the inspection, the same
Right.
company that manufactured the product, it's
Right.
like,
Well,
they're
the-
going to gang up on us.
Well, the good thing is that similar to the way that we did the high school was done by a company called Silktown. When we've had any issues at the high school, and there have been a couple since we did it, we've simply called Silktown. They have our warranties. We have our warranties on file here, and they've come out and fixed the roof. And it would be the same thing. Our warranty is held by the company doing the installation with an inspection by Tremco.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Sally? Councilman O'Connor.
Yeah, Sally, just a question. You said earlier that this roof had a history of being patched and leaks being fixed. Who patched it and who fixed it?
Since I've been there, Tremco has come in and has done, we have two contracts with we have a contract with Tremco to do emergency repairs and patching, and they came through and have done the repairs.
But yet it continually needs to get patched and fixed, so it begs the question, are they not doing a good job?
No, they're doing a good job. The roof has just, it's completely deteriorated. If I showed you up there, it is dried out. It has pulled away from the seams. It has had holes in it. And it's just completely, it has shrunken in spots. And it's just past its useful life at this point. Previous to this, I can't say, since we've had it, I've had Tremco up there. I do not know what Mr. Bushy and if they used any other roofing companies during the time before I was responsible for it. So I don't want to say 100% it's only been Tremco. That may not be accurate.
Councilman Biggs.
Thank you, Mayor. Sally, thank you for the presentation. Question for you. You said there are various sections that make the whole roof. So as we're looking to replace this current section, have you looked at the other sections and where they stand and
Yes.
if they need to be included in this replacement?
Well, what we did was, and as part of the documentation, you would see an architectural plan. Those were the 4 roofs that we went out to get pricing on, because those are the ones that are in this, not as deteriorated as this, but ones that do need attention. And so we got pricing for all of them. But my available funding through CIP right now is enough to cover this roof, but not adding to it. Again, when the budget comes around, I will be requesting more funds, because it's almost like building a war chest, to be able to do the roofs, and we'll add in those additional roofs each successive year.
Thank you very much.
No other questions or comments for Sally? Just a couple things, Sally, and thank you for the email earlier today. I forgot to mention when I introduced you that the motion is not for $118,950. That was Silktown's, the second lowest bid. Imperial's bid came in at $114,700. So we just need to correct the motion that is going to be made. And then I think Sue will probably just reflect that number in the minutes. I don't think we have to change the agenda, simply, change the motion when you do it. Following up on Councilman O'Connor's question to you, do you believe this is the original roof to Highcrest, that section?
I don't know. I didn't have any documentation on the roof. I don't know. I didn't have any background as to the history of it, so it would be a guess.
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, right now it's 2021. That building was built in the 70s. If it was 50 years, I've never seen a 50 years on a building like this with that type of a flat roof. That would be highly unusual.
Right, okay. I thought you were going down the road of be careful what you say about things built in the 1970s and
No.
lasting until 2021 in pretty
No,
relatively,
I would
relatively
never.
good shape. Okay, but in any event, that it has been 20-plus years of
Yes.
leaks, repairs,
Yes.
minor repairs to major repairs.
Yeah, our last leak was pretty major.
Right, and then I can only imagine this being probably the wettest summer, at least the wettest July in recent memories, but with the storms for the last 2 days that we've taken in,
Yes.
3+ inches, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Just looking at my own backyard puddling up.
Yeah.
Hats off to you and to Imperial for, being not only the lowest bidder, but getting this done within such a short time frame, having the materials on site. Fingers crossed that we can get it done before school starts, and then, like you
Right.
said, a couple days after school starts, they will work in conjunction with the kids back at school, but be able to fit it in. Hopefully, Mr. Emmett and the new principal at Highcrest will be able to work with you on that. So, without any other questions or comments, is there a motion for this tonight?
I'll make a motion to award a contract to Imperial Roofing Company for $114,700 to remove and replace the Highcrest School roof, Section D.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. And then moving on to item number 2, under council action. This is the purchase, if the council remembers correctly, in our budget, we did budget for some police cruiser replacements. I see Councilman Biggs nodding his head down there. I think you had brought up some of the concerns of the police department during the budget negotiations and the need for these cruisers. And we do have Superintendent, I'll call you Colonel, because that's how I remember you, Colonel Daverin, here to answer any questions on this and on the next item. But I guess maybe to you, or do you want me to describe it, or Colonel Daverin to give an explanation on the purchase of the 3 police vehicles?
I mean, I can, thank you, Mayor, I can do just a quick kind of overview or introduction to it, but I think you did a fine job. It was approved in this past year's budget. The police department is seeking to execute a contract to purchase 3 new cruisers based on model year availability. This was typically what they do is they look to cycle out the vehicles that are in the worst shape or costing the most amount in repairs or potentially a hazard for officers who need to respond to emergency situations. We'll do an analysis to determine what makes sense to be swapped out, and what we always try to do is whatever we can recycle down into the other part of the fleet, outside of the police department and emergency response will do so, again, based off of the overall condition of other fleet vehicles. So this is the police officers or police department's request to honor the budget approval to purchase 3 vehicles, which, if the council recalls, 2 years ago, the council opted to put money into a vehicle reserve fund, so that we, rather than financing vehicles going forward, we would actually do pay-as-you-go, which is better from a fiscal standpoint. And so these vehicles are essentially being paid for predominantly through that fund and with a little bit of general fund funding.
Great, thank you. And that is a pretty wise decision back then. No lease payments, no interest accrued. If we have the cash up front, pay for it. Any questions for either town manager or Colonel Davern on the purchase of the vehicles? Councilman Biggs.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question about the selection of the 3 vehicles. Have we looked at the various models of the vehicles and weighed which would be better for our department moving into the future as far as hybrid and whatnot?
The short answer is yes. I don't believe we have any hybrid police vehicles. I think they're all either SUV or police interceptor. We might have a Crown Vic or 2 that's still floating. I'm looking at Sally as I answer, sorry. I think we might have a Crown Vic or 2 still floating out there. But for the most part, it's either an interceptor or an SUV, Explorer SUV.
So, I mean, like moving into the future, though, have we considered the 3 that we're going to purchase? Have we looked at the better options for transferring our department into renewable energy, those kind of things?
Sally, have some history?
Yeah, currently for police vehicles, the interceptors the Fords are the vehicles that the town has consistently used. Ford used to make the smaller sedan and the SUV. In 2012, 2013, we had started to purchase some of the sedans, but the sedans were not the correct size for the majority. They were just too small. They were too small for all of the equipment and for the officers to be able to comfortably sit in them for hours at a time. Since that time, we had moved to all SUVs, and Ford Explorers are the police vehicle, are the police SUVs. Other departments around the state have attempted to use some of the Plymouth ones, the Durangos, but we are better luck with the Fords. And the one type of Explorer at this point is the main SUV you see throughout Connecticut. There really is not a wide range of vehicles that are made specifically for police vehicles. It just happens that the Fords are. Whether they move toward electric might be something in the future. Ford has recently come out with an electric F-150 vehicle. If they can get the power right and the acceleration correct in an electric vehicle that's that type of heavy duty, then I would imagine that they would also continue that investigation into police vehicles and other heavy duty vehicles. But at this point, the electric is really, we're a couple years, not a huge amount, but a couple years away from that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the models that Ford currently has for 2021, 22, that we did look at those options as far as the electrical ones and see how they work for our department or they don't work.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're looking at
It's-
all options and not just going what we're used to doing.
The kind of potentially misleading thing is the name Explorer is used both for a pedestrian car and a police car. It's when you see Police Interceptor
Correct.
that they have built it
The upgrade.
differently than the mass market, but under the same name, so.
Right.
If
I'm
that's-
asking because I've done my research and I've been looking at the interceptors, the police interceptors that are electrical, and I'm just trying to make sure we looked at that as well. That's all I'm
Yeah,
asking.
so-
Okay.
Yeah, the electric vehicles are really new. And they haven't really been tested out yet. I think in a year or two, I might be up here, or someone's going to be up here and saying, we may be moving the fleet, because they're proven to be able to perform like the gas-powered vehicles. At this point, I don't think that that there's a lot of confidence, because they are still so new.
The other
Got it. Thank you
component to
very
that
much.
we are looking into is the infrastructure that needs to be put in place to support an electric vehicle. There are a number of incentives available out there from a national-wide perspective in terms of going to EV, putting in systems, putting in charging stations. So I know Peter Gillespie in the planning department has been doing quite an amount of research, not only to capitalize for commercial properties within town to put those in, but also within the police department. So there have been conversations about being able to build in the infrastructure in order to do that. I almost think you can't do one without the other, obviously, so it would, we would need the infrastructure in place to support it. Otherwise, we're going to end up with where we are with compressed natural gas right now. We've had here three vehicles definitely that are still CNG without a system to refill them. We're driving to Hartford a couple days a week to fill them up because we don't have a system here that can actually fill them up on a regular basis. So we almost need the infrastructure first before we can purchase the vehicles or one and the same. So, but we are looking at it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions on the purchase of the 3 police vehicles? Hearing none? Okay. Is there a motion?
Yeah, sure. I'll motion to purchase 3 Ford Police Interceptor SUVs for the police department and remove 3 police vehicles that are past their life cycle using CNEF funds.
Second.
Motion has been made and, sure.
Should we put an amount in?
Oh, that
Yeah, we
was,
Can we state the amount?
yeah, not to exceed.
Okay.
Could we do a not to exceed 172,448?
Sure. I'll amend my motion to purchase 3 Ford Police Interceptor SUVs, not to exceed the total cost of $172,448 for the police department, and remove 3 police vehicles that are past their life cycle using CNEF funds.
Second?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Ayes have it. Okay, thank you. And I saw Sally nodding your head back there. That's fine with the not to exceed amount. We can get it under that, or,
Well, my concern, that is why I was looking at both of them, but I got the nod from both of them, because vehicle prices have fluctuated since we put this into the budget. My concern was, is that going to cover it? And I kind of got the nod from both of them.
okay. Thank you. And then item number 3 under council action is the OPM grant of, if I'm not mistaken, $35,000. We do have Colonel Davern here to explain this grant. This is something that's sorely needed, not only in the community of Weathersfield, but other communities that have seen a uptick in not only car break-ins, car thefts. Unfortunately, we're seeing theft, burglaries, home burglaries, business burglaries as well. So this grant will help the town police department, and they're working with other municipalities, I suspect, in trying to curb this uptick in crime. So I'll open the floor to you, Colonel, if you have some additional comments on this.
Yes, we received a call, excuse my voice. This is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, specifically for juvenile crime. And through the efforts of a detective lieutenant who had a really good idea, as opposed to spending the money on extra patrols hoping to find these folks, we're going to spend the money on developing investigative techniques to train patrol officers in advanced DNA collection, fingerprint collection, things of that nature, and try and solve these crimes after the fact. So it would benefit this department threefold. It provides us the extra personnel needed to solve these vehicle-related crimes, It'll provide patrol officers forensic tools to identify those responsible. And it will also be a precursor to training the next generation of detectives for the department.
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Is this, have these funds already been received? Is this kind of after the fact, or?
My understanding is it was kind of, it was pushed down by the state. It was started as a federal resource that the state received. The state put it out relatively late, and the town was able to capitalize it on it as soon as they could. Otherwise, we would have brought it in front of you. The deadline that they gave was to acknowledge that we were interested was last Friday. So there wasn't an opportunity to get in front of the council in advance. I didn't see a requirement for council approval, but I also didn't want to miss the opportunity and wait until mid-September to receive the funds and not get active on it. So we applied, and I apologize that we didn't come here first. There might not be a requirement for it, but I'm kind of covering to make sure that as soon as we're able to release funds, let's release funds.
I think I may be confusing it with something else that we signed off on after the fact, kind of.
Yeah, I think the last council meeting we had enforcement, speed and reckless driving enforcement, right, correct.
I'd like to point out this grant does not have a match, and it does not have an in-kind match, so we don't have to pay any cash or provide services to get the grant. And we did receive it less than 2 weeks ago with a very tight deadline, and we did do some collaborative work with Town of Cromwell to help get these questions answered to their satisfaction. We hope to hear very shortly.
I do just have one question, Mayor. How many officers will be able to be trained in these techniques that you're applying the grant for?
Well, we're hoping 6 or so officers will receive this training.
Good.
Okay. It's definitely needed. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion for this grant?
I'll
Yes.
make a motion to apply for and execute all documentation necessary to accept and follow through with the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant in the amount of $35,000.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And any abstentions on this? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Colonel. And then the final item is from the town manager, and I believe we have Charlie Brown on from Central Connecticut Health District.
It will be in a second.
To talk somewhat about
Wow, that's loud.
you can do the
Yeah, I'll just follow it. Hey, Charles, it's Gary Evans in the town council. You're live. I'm going to just do a quick intro about what this is about, but first I'm going to do a sound check with Derek Greger to make sure you can hear Charlie okay.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
And I meant Derek Sola. Too many
Yeah.
Dereks. Yep, I think we're good. All right, so that everyone is aware, this is essentially a formal announcement regarding COVID and the conversation about a townwide mask mandate. Just a little history, beginning in May, the town of Weathersfield began to see a sharp decrease in COVID numbers. By June, we had essentially eliminated the requirement for within Town Hall to make an appointment prior to entering the building and the screening that took place going into Town Hall. We also began in-person meetings as we moved from, the state has color code designations, I believe everybody at this point knows this. A red designates that there's more than 15 or more positive cases per 100,000. Then we moved to orange, which is 10 to 14 cases per 100,000. Again, heading down that line week after week to yellow, between 6 to 9 cases per 100,000, and then eventually landing in gray with fewer than 5 cases per 100,000. And we held that for a period of time. Unfortunately, what we've seen over the last month or more is that we've been heading back in the wrong direction. Numbers across the state, which includes Wethersfield, and predominantly, just speaking on behalf of the region itself, have been continuing to increase. About 2 weeks ago, we jumped from yellow right to red. We skipped over orange, and we've remained in red now for, and I don't want to speak ahead of schedule, but I believe we're still in red for 3 weeks, and I don't know if Charlie can touch on that. It's only Monday, so I don't know what you have for numbers. The decision to go towards a mandate is not something that I'm taking lightly. It's not something that I just decided over a week. I have a talented group of individuals that meet weekly in the Emergency Operations Center specific to this health crisis. I trust their instincts, I trust their knowledge, and I trust their expertise. And I use that guidance to make decisions. I don't always agree with the decisions, and we have that conversation and that debate, but when the entire group seems to be in the same direction, it's kind of hard to ignore that thought. I know that if the numbers continue to go up, it means we're starting to impact people's health and safety, and ultimately, I have concerns that if we don't start to address this and take actions, that we're going to start to see a stall or shutting down of the economy again, and I don't want that. I don't want to see that happen. I mean, that's kind of a much deeper impact and harder for us to rebound from. So from a town management standpoint and the impact related to that, it's in the best interest of the health, safety, and the economy to put a townwide mask mandate into effect. Until, at a minimum, the number of the cases significantly declines. I see the mandate as having the same flexibility that we had before. It requires masks when indoors for any buildings that the public enters, where people cannot safely be 6 feet apart. And again, similar to last time when in restaurants, it doesn't apply once you're seated at a restaurant for food and drinks. Again, the idea is not only is it health and safety, but the tie to the economic impacts related to it. With that, I'll default to any questions the council may have, and also have Charlie Brown, obviously from Central Connecticut Health District, on the line to answer questions.
Councilwoman Pelletier.
I have a question that's probably best for Charles. So earlier in the pandemic, there was data from contact tracing that showed that most of the cases were being transmitted in private homes among small gatherings of, family and friends, or sometimes large gatherings, but in private homes. Do you have data to suggest that now the primary transmission is coming from public spaces?
Well, what we have right now is, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we have right now is data that's showing that we're seeing exponential increases in the number of cases that we have as a whole. How that's being spread primarily is airborne, and, we are seeing cases, that are going in the household and being spread in the household. The main reason that that's happening at this point is because we're dealing with a variant of the original virus. Everybody, I'm sure, is aware of the Delta variant, as they're calling this one. It has about 95% of the cases that we're seeing in Connecticut at this time are of the Delta variant. Now, it is much more infectious than the original strain of COVID-19. So we're actually seeing spread not only in the households, we're seeing spread out in the community. And one of the only things that we can actually do at this time that we can actually take action on is masking at this point at the local level. We're doing everything that we can to increase the number of vaccinations that we see. We had a good news this morning with the FDA actually getting approval of their vaccine for the Pfizer vaccine, full approval. That will hopefully move some people who may have been hesitant to get vaccinated off the dime. But right now, what we're looking at is basically a suite of mitigation strategies, and vaccination being one of the primary ones. But masking at a community level is definitely one that will make an impact in the number of cases that we see throughout the community.
Do you have any concerns that ordering vaccinated people to start wearing masks again undermines the public's confidence in the vaccines, or otherwise disincentivizes the unvaccinated people to go out and get the shot?
No, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, originally when, here this past spring, they were really trying to push people to get the shot so that they could go back to, quote, normal. You don't have to wear the mask, you don't have to do anything, just get the shot. But that was before we were dealing with a variant. So our situation has changed significantly since that particular message came out. And people really have to understand that the environment has changed significantly. We're not dealing with the same virus. We're dealing with one that, as I said, is almost, a little bit over twice as infectious as the original strain. Somebody who actually contracts the Delta variant has the opportunity to spread that particular virus to 5 to 8 people on average, where the original one was about 2 to 2.5. So it's definitely something that, as we're looking at the situation that we're dealing with, people need to understand that even though wearing a mask is inconvenient, it's something that we have to do. And I will apologize, as I said, from the beginning of this pandemic. I have no problem apologizing for the inconvenience. I just am really very tired of having to offer condolences. And that's the decision that we have. Being inconvenienced to having to wear a mask, or, offering condolences more and more often.
So, but what metrics are you using for your recommendation, like to either impose the mandate or to lift a mandate? Because I think it needs to be tied to some actual numbers or vaccination rate so that the public understands this isn't just some order coming down from on high. And so people have like hope that, okay, once we hit this, once we see this, then it can get lifted. Because I think that, with the guidance changing every few months, people feel like the goalposts keep moving.
And that's absolutely the case. And unfortunately, the situation that we're dealing with it is with a live virus that is actually adapting to the environment that it's in. So, if I were to be able to say, okay, when we hit this particular level, then we can go back to normal. That's, I believe, the mistake that we made in the springtime, to say, if we get to this level, or you get vaccinated, then you're not going to have to wear the mask again. Because of the evolutionary, propensity of this virus, we can't say those types of things. Now, there are levels, and this is kind of what we're actually utilizing at this time, that were set up for contemplation of action. And, initially, as Gary said, it's got the gray, yellow, orange, and red. So those give, points when the number of cases get to a particular point for government to consider action. So right now, we've been in the red for 3 weeks. And really where we should be considering action for preventative measures like this, back in the orange. We jumped right over orange. So trying to be able to play some catch up here by taking an action, that we can actually take.
Okay, so you didn't really answer my question about metrics. So
Well, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. What we can use, once again, is the number of cases per 100,000 as we use those red, orange, yellow alert levels as points of conversation as to what actions we should be taking. So at this point in the red, being able to take an action accordingly. So as we get down into the lower levels, say, we get to the point to where we're at 10 to 14 cases, that's a point to where we can have a conversation and say, is it appropriate at this point, looking at the trends over the past, several weeks, looking at what's happening in context to the region, to the state, that we can take action to move that down.
So the CDC recommends that people wear masks indoors, the vaccinated people wear masks indoors, if their community has more than 50 weekly cases per 100,000 residents. Weathersfield's around 23.9 cases, well below where the point where the CDC would recommend vaccinated people put their mask back on. So why do you think that we should, that we shouldn't follow the CDC's guidance, but we should follow yours?
Because at this point, what we're seeing, especially within Weathersfield, where we had a week of 51 cases, and then have another week where it dropped down to 21 cases. We have seen those 50 cases per 100,000. The reason that I'm making this recommendation is, this is an action that we can take to limit the number of cases. To be
I
able
thought
to
that
bring
was
it down.
50
And
cases.
as far as the, individuals who are vaccinated, this is not something that's going to cause them anything other than an inconvenience.
Well, I thought that 51 cases was 51 individual cases in Weathersfield, not 51 cases per 100,000.
It was 51 cases. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I misspoke.
So we are well below the CDC's threshold for advising vaccinated people to put their masks back on. And I also understand like the thinking that, well, it's a small thing to ask people to wear masks. It's a low cost and people have been doing it, so what's the harm? I just question the prudence of like issuing an order that we know a lot of people are going to disregard and not follow, and that we know the town really is not going to be able to effectively enforce. So I just have concerns about, issuing an order and that people aren't going to follow and the town can't enforce, and does that like undermine the credibility of public health officials, credibility of town officials to issue such an order, when I think that people are already putting their masks back on? I mean, you go out and, you see people indoors, people are using their, personal judgment and their own risk assessment to put their masks back on when they go out, and, they don't need, the government telling them that they have to. And that's a question also for the town manager, because it's more of a policy, question than a health, question.
Yeah, so, and I see multi-layers to this, and those are great questions. I'm just kind of looking at my notes, and I think where Charlie was going, or at least where my mind was going as he was explaining his rationale, was it's about taking that proactive measure so that we can slow the rate or the transmission rate at the point that we're at, and the longer we wait, the higher you're looking at potentially going up. So it's about, okay, well, let's take a proactive step to see if we can slow that rate of transmission. Just part of the conversation that we have at the EOC is, are we already starting behind the eight ball? Did we already start this too late? Should we have started earlier? Obviously, we didn't get a chance. We weren't right from yellow to red. When you see the numbers are increasing, I think the protective measure is the sooner you take action, the better. The CDC's guideline is an interesting, at 50, we're at 23.9. I don't know what we're heading to next week. But the reality is, do you wait till you get 50 if you're starting to see a trend line that's bouncing? I'd like to see the number go down. I'm thinking, again, in terms of the business community, personal level, I don't want to put a mask on either. I have my own rationale for it, but ultimately I look to do it to say, okay, well, I need to keep the economy moving. The fact that I have to put it on for a period of time when I'm in a store, to use Charlie's words, is an inconvenience. I'd like to discuss that conversation of what the correct metric is. I don't know what the answer is. The concern is if you take the mask off too soon, do you prevent everything that you've tried to accomplish while wearing the mask? Nobody wants to keep it longer than they have to either at the same time. The enforceability is also a tricky one. We only have so many staff members that can go around and to do it. We will do the best that we can to enforce it where we can and when we can. Our experience last time was if you give me a call to tell me that people aren't wearing masks or socially distancing, by the time I get there, the issue's over. I think to grab onto one of your other points, which I think is an interesting one, is that people are starting to naturally wear the mask, and it's going in that direction. But you still see that balance of, well, I don't have to wear the mask, so I'm not going to wear the mask. And it's a tricky one because sometimes those are the ones who potentially could be the ones spreading it, and you don't know, right? People can walk around asymptomatic or with mild symptoms, and they could be passing it, and you don't necessarily know. And I think that's kind of the concern, or that's kind of the action step to say, well, if people are wearing a mask, the people who don't know, it's just one protective measure to say, well, you don't know what you have, and you don't know what you're passing, but with the mask on, we're trying to reduce that spread.
I just want to highlight also something that Charles mentioned and something that, I saw on the state's coronavirus website was the rate in Wethersfield actually went down substantially, like from 2 weeks ago to last week. Now, I know we don't know what's going to happen, this week. I know the data comes out on Thursdays, so we won't know for a few more days whether we are actually going back down or whether it was an anomaly or we're just flattening out. But I don't see, I think we should wait until Thursday when the new data comes out to see what the trend line is. Because right now, it sounds like we're being extremely proactive, and, I respect that, and I know this is coming from a great place. You want to, we all want this to have as few cases as possible. We want everyone in the community to be safe. But I just have concerns about, I think it doesn't hurt to wait till Thursday in light of the fact that we're being extremely proactive and going well above and beyond the CDC recommendations. I would be more comfortable following the CDC on this than the Central Connecticut Health District. And I would like to point out that, the governor, who most people give high marks to how he's handled the pandemic, he doesn't think a statewide mask mandate is necessary. So if the governor doesn't think it's necessary, if the CDC doesn't think it's necessary, I don't think it's necessary. And I'm comfortable siding with the CDC on this. It's not that I think masks don't work. I think they do work. I'm wearing one tonight. If I'm going to be in a crowded place indoors, I will put a mask on because I'm making my own personal risk assessment. So I just think to suggest that there's no cost to this, and even to businesses, in some ways maybe you think it'll help businesses, by cutting down transmission, but I mean, it might hurt some businesses because people don't want to go in and cover their faces when they go into a store, especially a lot of places really aren't crowded, and it would be unnecessary. The grocery store comes to mind, where, you're not packed in, and it's just such a large space, so I just don't want to do something that's just, performative or premature, because I do think it also would discourage some people from getting vaccinated if we're telling them, oh, the vaccines really work, but once you get vaccinated, you got to keep your mask on and you got to still socially distance. What is the incentive for someone who's nervous about getting vaccinated to go out and get vaccinated then? And even, with my own child, I have one who's too young to get vaccinated and one who was eligible. And I was, when he first became eligible, I was sort of debating, oh, do I want to go and get him vaccinated? I got vaccinated right away, but, my child, I was a little nervous. And as soon as the CDC said, once you've been vaccinated, you could take off your mask, I made an appointment for him to get vaccinated because that was worth it to me, that he didn't have to walk around with his face covered everywhere he went, and having like the weird, social interaction and conversations when both people are masked and you can't read their faces. So I think to reinstate a mask mandate for vaccinated people will disincentivize some people to get vaccinated. I mean, just from my own personal experience with my own, decisions with my family members. I also think that we're being way overly cautious in light of the CDC recommendations to require, masks for vaccinated people once you hit 50 cases per 100,000, and we're well below that. We're at 23. I also, want to commend the residents of this town for, there's such a high vaccination rate. We have an extremely high vaccination rate. We're about 75% of all residents have received at least one shot, and that's not just adults, but all residents. We have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. So people might be concerned about us turning into Louisiana or, other states that are having some outbreaks that have extremely low vaccination rates. But I mean, I think the vaccines work. I think it sends the wrong message to say, well, even though you've been vaccinated, you still have to wear a mask and follow all these rules. I think to incentivize people to get vaccinated, we should keep the status quo, follow the CDC guidance. And I don't see the harm in waiting till Thursday to see if our numbers continue to trend downward, because they actually went down week over week the last 2 weeks. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for listening to my long soliloquy. It's just something I feel strongly about.
Mayor, I did have a quick, I'm sorry, Charlie, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, it's Pat, by the way. I'm just making sure because I'm into the mic wearing a mask tonight, but I just had I think the only question Mary didn't ask in that, sorry to say. She mentioned the high vaccination rate, which should be applauded. Now, have we noticed, despite the uptick in COVID cases, have we noticed a downward trend in hospitalizations?
Unfortunately, no. Statewide hospitalizations continue to go up and have gone up significantly.
I'm speaking specifically to Weathersfield.
Unfortunately, we don't have data for hospitalizations at the town level. The lowest level that we can get for hospitalizations is actually at the county level, which includes Hartford, which really kind of skews our numbers quite a bit.
Breakthrough? Breakthrough?
Yeah, you could ask that if you want, Deputy Mayor.
Charles, do we have data on how many positive cases are considered breakthrough cases for Weathersfield?
No, unfortunately, they don't issue that data at the town level either. What we're seeing, though, is, and I know from our point where we're doing contact tracing, where we do ask people that have tested positive if they've been vaccinated, we are seeing an increase in the number. Anecdotally, as our contact tracers are doing follow-up with each individual case. And the state has actually said that there are a number of these, quote, breakthrough cases that have been occurring as we go on within those people that have been vaccinated. And I point to, what was just said. We do have a very high vaccination rate among the towns, yet we're still seeing increases in the number of cases at this point. So, that's pointing very, very much towards the fact that this particular vaccine, it will protect you from going to the hospital. It does a very good job of protecting people from dying from this, but it doesn't prevent you from getting the disease itself. And that's what we're actually seeing as what's going on right now.
So if we were to make an assumption, just hypothetical, that the 50 cases in Weathersfield would all be considered minor cases, still able to spread the virus.
That's the
but
issue.
You may have, serious flu symptoms and spend 3-4 days on the couch feeling lousy.
But But unfortunately, we can't guarantee that. And what we have in each one of our towns is a significant number of our population that cannot be vaccinated at this point. And that population is those that are under 12 years old. So as we start to prepare to go back to school and go back to school fully in school, having, the ability to do something to limit the spread within our community, to me, just makes sense.
Do we have data that would suggest that the under 12 population has been contracting the virus in Weathersfield?
Not necessarily in Weathersfield. We have seen cases where the age has been under 12. We have seen that within Weathersfield, and we've seen that across the board. Nationwide, they're seeing increases in the number of, the younger population, that under 12 cohort, school age, actually contracting the disease, and not just contracting the disease, but also increases in hospitalizations. That's nationwide.
I just want to point out that, of course, the state does have a mask requirement for all school children, from K to 12. So, which they're all required to wear masks, all the students and staff and faculty. So I think that's just important to point out, because you did mention the under 12, and they are going to be wearing masks at school as it is.
Yeah, and I believe that that's the right thing for them to do, absolutely. The issue that I see, and the reason why I'm really advocating very strongly for taking this action at this time, is that the CDC has shown, and studies have shown, that when you enact a community-wide comprehensive masking policy, you can show decreases in the number of cases per day, close to 1 to 2 cases per day. And that 1 to 2 cases, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really does eliminate the spread, because if you look at the number of potential people that individual case can spread it to, that's 5 to 8 people. So we're eliminating that 5 to 8 additional people that are going to contract this disease. And it's not just the people that unfortunately, chose not to get vaccinated. It may be children, it may be persons that are immunocompromised, it may be the elderly that have, comorbidities that will cause this to be pushed them over the edge. Those are the things that we, as a community, should be protecting. And being able to take an individual action an action like this helps to protect each one of those individuals that can't take advantage of that vaccine.
Charlie, it's Pat one more time. No, I appreciate you actually coming on here, and I agree, because I'm probably one of the few people, I don't know if anybody else had COVID here, but I actually did get COVID back last October. I think Charlie, you were one of the first people to call me and just check on and see how I was doing. And I recognize that this is serious, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I know more about viral transmission than someone like you or the CDC. I have a hard time with a mask mandate, only because I don't think it's within my right as a member of this council to tell somebody else who lives in town with me what they can and can't wear to participate in society. And for me, it's just a slippery slope, right? I'm not debating, I think masks work. I get very cautious when we start going down this path, and that's just where I stand on it. That's at a personal level. I think you look at the vaccination rate, almost 75% of the town have gotten at least one shot. So I think people are taking personal responsibility in combating this virus, and I still see, when I go out to restaurants, people who want to wear masks are still wearing masks. So if we can't enforce it, to me, it just seems like it's like, what's the point? Because people who feel more at risk are still going to wear the mask, whether it's mandated or not, and people who don't want to wear a mask aren't going to wear a mask, whether it's mandated or not. So That's just my feeling, but I want to say I do appreciate you getting on the line with us tonight.
Well, one thing I will say, and we've heard this from, other towns as I've spoken to folks in the communities. We've heard from business owners who are out there, who, are on the front line, so to speak, with the enforcement of this. And they have actually said that a mandate assists them in being able to enforce this, because then it's not them as an individual business owner making a choice. It's universal and across the board. And it's the town taking action, so they're able to stand up and say, I'm sorry, but you need to do this because the town's taken that action. It takes a lot of the heat off of them from trying to enforce and do the right thing. So, that is one thing that I think, also needs to be considered.
Councilman O'Connor?
Just to clarify that, though, every business has a right to determine whether they want to force someone to wear a mask or not, correct?
Yeah, well, at this point, they have that option.
Okay.
At this point, but not if we had put in this
No,
mandate.
I just wanted to clarify, at this point, a business can enforce that if they so choose without having to blame somebody else. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the issue, and I'll say this right now, I honestly don't think that this should be a debate that's being had at the local level. From the beginning of this pandemic, the governor had come out and said that a comprehensive, mandate for masking, was the way that we actually could limit the spread when we did not have a vaccine, and we proved that it would work at that point. I don't understand really why that has changed, because the situation itself, as we sit here, even though we have a vaccine, the virus is changing to the point to where it's continuing to spread in spite of that fact. So, my opinion is the governor should be making this a universal mandate across the state, because you can look at the trends across the state, and we are becoming more and more red on the map every single week. So, it's going to get to the point, as we were in the spring, to where trying to see something other than red, which is widespread community transmission, is something that would be rare. So, like I said, I appreciate the conversation and, the deliberation that you're having at this point. But really, in my opinion, it's not something that at the local level that we should be debating town by town. Comprehensive policy along this line is what will keep this from spreading, because I'll tell you right now, this virus does not respect any border. It will pass from town to town. An inconsistent application of the policy is what's going to allow it to do so.
Councilman Hill?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Charlie. One question is, how do we, as a community, kind of end this cycle of, vaccinations, masks, no masks? Is it all based upon, do we have to hit a certain target in terms of the percentage of the population that is fully vaccinated and we have herd immunity? Like, what needs to occur beyond, wearing masks and vaccinations?
To be honest, there may be a point where, we have to continue to utilize masks as a strategy, and it's not a one and done type of a situation. We're in entirely, uncharted waters, so to speak. And the challenge that we have is we're trying to affect policy at a local level, and, we're dealing with a global pandemic. So everything that's happening around the world can affect us and be on our doorstep, in a matter of hours. So the challenge that we have with herd immunity, for example, and with the vaccination rates that we see locally, is that you look across the country, and if it's not, uniformly applied, then we have the situation that we're dealing with right now, where a variant can, evolve because of the increase in cases at a particular point, and just through random chance, be able to get past the vaccine that we've developed and be able to continue to spread. That's what the evolution of this particular virus, as we've said from the beginning, it's very opportunistic. And the more opportunities that it has to infect people, the more opportunities it has to be able to mutate and then to get beyond that protection that we have. So, where I see us in the future, if we can get to the point to where we have a high enough vaccination rate to get to stay, close to where this virus is replicating, and actually developing new variants, that we may end up at the point where we deal with this almost like a seasonal flu. We're not there yet. Where we see problems in our own country, there are issues around the world where people don't have enough vaccine to be able to make this an endemic virus. So we are going to be challenged by this. And unfortunately, policies like mask wearing, policies like vaccination, the simple 3 W's of washing your hands, those are things that we have to take into our daily lives and utilize when they're appropriate. So we may go, for a while to where we're able to, to take a step back from wearing a mask because the rates of infection are low. And we may be able to enjoy like what we did this summer. But we have to prepare and say that these are tools in our toolbox to be able to utilize appropriately as we're seeing those cases go up, to be able to use to slow that transmission down. This happens in Asia, and it's happened there many, many years. They utilize masks, for influenza on a regular basis as part of their strategy to slow the spread. That's the point, I think, that in the future that we may be getting to, is that this is just a tool in our toolbox to be able to use when it's necessary to be able to slow the spread of viruses.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for either Charles or Gary? I just had a couple for Gary. Mary had brought it up with enforcement. How is this to be enforced in Weathersfield, or how is it being currently enforced in the other towns that have mask mandates?
Every town is handling it a little differently. I don't know if Charles can speak to what he's familiar with the other agencies or the other municipalities. We have a team of individuals who do enforcement for a number of different things. We would ask them to participate, but again, enforcement is very difficult. We'll do our best to enforce it with the assets that we have. I'm a realist. After the last round, it was difficult to enforce, but we'll do our best to enforce it where we can, when we can. Other municipalities, I know that West Hartford has already talked about their fining structure. I mean, that's their process. I think that's always an option and an opportunity. I just don't see us getting to that point. We're still very considerate that town residents, people coming to the town, need to be treated a certain way and a certain level. That's not to suggest West Hartford is doing anything that treats their visitors or their residents differently, but obviously we want to be considerate and try a gentle touch rather than a strict enforcement through penalties and fines.
And what we saw even in the midst of the pandemic, when we had the ability to go out and ticket and fine, is that wasn't what the primary method that we utilized. We really function on education, where if we get complaints, going out to speak to the individuals, speak to the businesses, and explain the rationale as to why this particular strategy at this time is the one that we need to follow. And we've seen very good compliance along those lines.
Speaking of businesses, if a restaurant has their own policy, which is to wear a mask when you enter, but when you're seated, you can obviously take your mask off to eat or drink at a restaurant. Is there any change with this effect on restaurants? Or are they, unfortunately, back in the springtime when restaurants weren't fully 100% open, the mask requirement was still in place. The restaurants didn't gradually reopen until after the mask requirements were lifted with a lot of the vaccinations out there. So to Mary's point of people hesitant to go to restaurants or businesses with this requirement, have we seen in any of the towns, an impact on restaurants and how their clientele are reacting to a mask mandate?
At this point, I can't really give a good experience just because we only have one other town that has a mandate within the district, and that was just enacted over the weekend.
Okay.
So Rocky Hill has a mask mandate at this point. So I can't really say how, the hurricane and everything else, really how they've reacted up to this point. Once again, I think that with the vaccination rate, with the masking, being part of a suite of strategies, and that's, I think, what's going to allow us to continue to have the restaurants open. We don't have, at the local level, the option of being able to restrict the restaurants in any way, other than to initiate a mask mandate. That's the only thing that we can do. The governor has taken that power away from the local levels and said that, that's something that we can't enact. So masking is really it. And really, from even where I sit, we don't see a lot of issues, within restaurants where if people are wearing a mask, they get to the table. And I think our restaurants have done a very good job of, utilizing what barriers they can, utilizing what spacing they have within the restaurants themselves to allow for as safe of an environment as they can get. The masking situation, once again, is just an additional layer to be able to, at this point with the case numbers that we're seeing, to help mitigate the spread.
Okay. And then the last two questions or maybe one's for you, Charles, but this one's for Gary, is are we looking at this as, in perpetuity for forever, for however long that this is going to be? I don't know, somebody had asked, is there a trigger to say, okay, when we hit Thursday's numbers come out and we are back in the yellow, take the mask off. If we're back in the red, put the mask back on? Or is this something that, I know the governor's executive orders have deadlines or, expirations to them. Is there an expiration for this, or is there a trigger to take it off?
Yeah, I think that's, to Councilor Pelletier's question about, the metric and what you're looking at. I think, initially in my mind, it was, okay, if we could be orange 2 weeks in a row, that would show that, okay, we're starting to stabilize. In conversations with Charlie, a point that was raised was, okay, well, when's the right time to take your foot off the accelerator type thing? And is it too soon if you're like, okay, well, I was in orange, so maybe we should scale back a little bit. We're okay, let's take the mask off. And then you go back up to red and you're putting the mask back on. So you do want to avoid the yo-yo effect. At the same time, I do want to be considerate of the fact that, okay, well, is it yellow? Is yellow the line? Where is it? And I keep going with this idea of seeing a significant reduction week over week to feel comfortable that it's continuing to head in that right direction. I do think, and this was almost the conversation before that Charlie was getting into about, the repetitiveness and the cycle and the waves. The reality is this might be how it is, or, we're 18 months into this. We're still learning every day, every week, how this works within our system, and by that I mean our own physical system as well as within each region and in each state. Some of this is going to be trial by error, what works, what doesn't. We've got a vaccination in place. We have a high vaccination rate. We didn't have masks. the numbers went back up to where they were early on. So we put the masks back on and they start dropping. You start to understand that the transmission is driven by not having masks. So, you know, I guess that's kind of a long answer to your question. I'm comfortable with saying, okay, if you want to talk about metrics, we can put it in place. I don't know off the top of my head what that would be, other than saying significant reduction week over week for a period of time. To feel comfortable that, okay, we're heading in that way, we can take our foot off the accelerator now and see if it levels.
Okay.
I don't know if
With-
Charlie has anything to add to that, or
Well,
if
with
I'm off.
that,
No, I completely agree with what you said, Gary.
okay. If we start to see a decrease over the next, 10 days, if the numbers on Thursday come out, the 2 week, 10 days from now, the following Thursday, but then they start to increase when schools go back in, then, where are we with, okay, it's, we got to mask up with kids in schools, which is being done. We are masking up, at least in Weathersfield, when we are shopping, but still the numbers creep up. And, I guess this goes to what Charles was saying. I mean, this could be something that is just with us, that we all, unfortunately we fear, but may be the reality. I mean, that's not a question, that's just a comment. And then my final question for you, Charles, is the governor's executive orders, at least on the mask requirement, I believe for schools, and actually maybe all the governor's executive orders expire, given, if the legislature does not extend them on September 30th. Is this, would this be one that would go beyond September 30th because it's a municipal requirement versus a gubernatorial executive order?
Yes.
Okay.
So, you have the power through local declarations. And as far as I know, there's still a locally declared emergency within Weathersfield, correct?
No, we have one in effect from, I think, April 2020, I think I signed it.
Mm-hmm. So, with that local declaration, then you have the power to be able to enact mandates along these lines.
Okay. Thank you. One other comment from Councilwoman Pelletier.
I just want to say I was a little disturbed at the how vague the policy would be as far as when this could get lifted. Well, when we see things going down a few weeks and then we'll reassess. I think that's not fair to the people. I think it, just because this just goes back to the goalpost constantly shifting. Like, we'll let you know. We're not going to tell you why we put it in place exactly when the CDC and the governor say it's not necessary. And we're not going to tell you when we're going to lift it. We'll just know when we know. And I think that is a little troubling to me. And I also wanted to point out one thing that Charles said, that this really shouldn't be done at the municipal level. This should be a statewide policy. I agree with him. The governor has been asked by CROG just last week and by other towns to put in place a statewide mandate. This is something he said he doesn't think is necessary right now, but he could do it in the future. This is really the job for the governor because, as Charles said, COVID doesn't know borders. We have a small town and only one other town in our health district has a mask mandate. So all these places around us, it's this patchwork of these states require vaccinated people to wear masks, these towns, don't. It's not effective. We need a statewide policy, and let's let the governor make that decision. And, in the meantime, I'm comfortable following the CDC, which, and I'm not going to regurgitate everything I already said, but so I'll just leave it.
And I would like to point out that the reason that I said that the governor, that I would be much more comfortable with the governor doing that is so that there would be widespread coverage and we wouldn't have to worry about the borders and an individual town. In the absence of him acting, I think that the responsible action is to take that town decision and to make that that mandate happen. You know, each person that we have the ability to keep this from spreading, it has the ability to save lives, and that's the bottom line. You know, once again, to me, you know, wearing a mask is an inconvenience, and I don't like it myself. However, you know, if I can save one person's life by taking that individual inconvenience, I will do so gladly.
Councilman O'Connor.
Just two quick things. So there's no action we need to take right now. Is that correct?
That's correct, not at this time.
So then this is a foregone conclusion that we are putting this mandate in. Is that correct?
The short answer is yes. What I wanted to get, and, you know, Councilor Pelletier and to Mayor Rel's point is some, right, so I'll go in this direction. The reality is, what I'm hearing is we'd like to see a metric, or we'd like to understand when the end is, and I think that's a reasonable request. I'm not sure if I can meet it, but I'd like to sit with my EOC people and say, okay, is there a way to figure that out so that we're giving good information to the public so that they understand this isn't, you know, how long this may be. I can't say that I'll be able to do that. So part of the dialogue is so that the council has that opportunity to ask those questions and bring that forward. I think, and this ties into a certain aspect, the difficult part of my job, one of the difficult parts of my job is that sometimes I have to make decisions that are extremely unpopular, and I recognize that, and that sometimes puts the council in a strange and awkward position, because ultimately you are leaders within this, for this town, and you're elected within this town. So I understand that causes some frustration, you know, both for the public and both for the council, sometimes when I have to make these decisions. But it was the opportunity for the council to come forward with some questions that I can try to formulate answers to as we move forward through this. You know, and if I can just point out something that was kind of between Councilor Pelletier and also to Charlie, you know, this idea of cover. You know, the reality is that businesses have come forward saying, look, if we make the decision for ourselves, it's detrimental to our business because we might push off a patron. So we'd really like the local government to come forward and say, we'd like you to put this in place. The local government, being us, feels the same way. I'd like the governor to come forward as well, because it provides me coverage, so I don't have to have this conversation or put the council in this position or put the residents in this position, but that's not happening. We're not getting that coverage. So to Charlie's point, we have to do what's in the best interest. I look at Hartford that's surrounding us. I look at all the municipalities that are immediately surrounding us are in the red. We're a regional economy, which means it's not just about Weathersfield residents going to Weathersfield shops or Weathersfield dinners or restaurants. It's about the regional economy coming here and us going out into the regional economy. And I think we're heading in this direction as a whole, despite what the governor's actions are. And I can't say what his intentions are, if it's because he doesn't feel it's necessary right now, or he's allowing local government to make decisions because for whatever his intentions are. You know, I think he gets pushback one way or the other. He gets part of the electorate that says we want to make the decision, and the other part says make the decision for us, similar to here. So I wouldn't call it a foregone conclusion in terms of, you know, this was the opportunity for me to hear, in the public to hear what your concerns are with me going forward with a mandate, and for me to see what actions I can take while the mandate's in place to help the local population understand which way we're going and what we're trying to do.
Thank you for that. I will just share my opinion is I feel the governor has been completely derelict in his duty and has basically just kicked the can down the road. I mean, if this truly is, and I'll use Mary's words, which I thought were very appropriate considering the Highcrest leaky roof situation we just had, if this is just, you know, a patchwork type of effort, we put a mandate in the town of Weathersfield, but one or two of the surrounding towns that come in and visit us and eat at our restaurants and everything doesn't have that mandate, and they're bringing this in, it's still going to spread. And all we're going to do is patch it. We're not going to actually solve for anything. If this is truly such an epidemic, the governor should make this a mandate and take that responsibility out of the municipalities and protect all of Connecticut, and not just say each town protect yourself. So that's one thing. The other thing with regards to the mandate is
I believe the people of Weathersfield take great personal responsibility. I think the fact that we have such a high vaccine rate is indicative of that. And so I wholeheartedly support someone's right not to get a vaccine, but their right not to get a vaccine should not affect my rights to whether I have to wear a mask or not. I should not be a consequence of your right of not getting a vaccine. Wholeheartedly support. Don't get a vaccine if you don't want. I got a vaccine. I would encourage people to get a vaccine, but I would not force people to get a vaccine. I think the fact that so many people in this town have gotten vaccines and take personal responsibility, I see no reason why we have to mandate that they now have to wear a mask. Again, my attitude is if I want to go to an establishment and they're requiring me to wear a mask, well, then my decision may be I'll go to a different establishment, or maybe my decision will be, well, these guys really are on top of it. I'm absolutely going to come eat here. So I think it goes both ways. It's not always a negative. And so for whatever it's worth is I don't support this mandate. I would follow the governor's mandate on it so that I know we're all in the same boat together. But I'm just going to go back to this whole debate we had on the leaky roof at Highcrest is we're just patching right now. And all these other towns are going to come in here because we have great restaurants, and it's not going to protect us. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councilman Biggs?
Thank you, thank you, Mayor. So my 2 cents is, I can agree and understand where everyone is coming from, but having children that go to daycare, that Charlie has been very helpful with, they have a mask mandate. Cases have been down and have not gone up at all. In the military, we have a mask mandate, mandatory that when we go on military bases, we wear a mask. Numbers are down. And working for the state of Connecticut, mask mandate in all public buildings that are state buildings. Numbers down. I don't like wearing a mask. It sucks. But are we to say that wearing a mask is not appropriate to be the leaders in our town to slow down the cases? I understand the patchwork aspect of it, but if we're going to patchwork it to decrease numbers in our town because maybe unvaccinated people, maybe people from out of town are bringing it in, what's the inconvenience if we're going to slow the numbers in our town? I don't think we should do a mandate. Maybe since the CDC put it out, I believe the CDC never mandated it. I think they highly suggested it, and it left it up to states to do their thing. Why can't we highly recommend it rather than make it a mandatory thing? But what I'm saying is that let's not absolutely not look at masks. I think we need to have masks. I think we absolutely do.
If I can just add to that, because I know you follow up on mine, absolutely agree. Highly recommend it. I wouldn't mandate it. And that's what I was trying to get at.
And then my question to Charlie is, as far as education, you spoke on education. Is there any education from your department for the district about, making your immune systems healthier, living proper lifestyles to help fight the virus if you do contract it? Is there any literature that is being shared to give to our communities to help them with their healthy lifestyles and living?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Could you repeat that? Unfortunately, my phone messed up for a second there.
No worries. I was asking about literature to help our communities live a healthier lifestyle, to help them if they do happen to contract the COVID virus that attacks their immune system. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we've put out there to say, hey, you should start living like this, eat a little healthier, do this kind of exercising? Is there anything that we can share publicly as far as PSAs and whatnot for that kind of lifestyles?
Yeah, I mean, we do have, quite a bit of information up on our website as far as COVID is concerned. What I'm excited about is that we have another state grant, an expanding lab capacity grant that's going to allow us to hire a health educator to be able to develop just that type of messages and get out there within our communities and make sure that people are hearing them. So doing that health education. I agree with you. I think that, a lot of the things where we see individuals who contract COVID, things like obesity, have really impacted whether or not somebody has an adverse outcome or succumbs to the disease. So there are a lot of things that individually, we can take on ourselves to be able to limit or at least lower our risk of succumbing to COVID. I'll take this opportunity to actually talk about our walking competition that's coming up here in September. The ability for folks to actually get out there, walk, be more active, allows them to be healthier as a whole. But we ask, even with that, that we do this responsibly. That if we're walking with individuals or within 6 feet of other individuals, that you wear a mask.
And Charlie, my last question, for the mask mandate, would you just be suggesting this within spaces, or are you requesting to do this also outdoor spaces?
It's an indoor space is what we're looking at right now. And generally, once again, being outdoors, I think, is the safest place that you can be if you're going to be around other people. Because you have much more ventilation. This is an airborne disease primarily, and it's spread through airborne ways. So, indoors is where we worry about this more and more, because the amount of viral load that, if you don't have good ventilation within a building, that you could pick this up. And having everybody wearing a mask, helps to increase the effectiveness of this as a policy. So, once again, I think that, as far as the individuals choosing to do so or not choosing to do so, when you start to take out and make this more of a patchwork policy, then you're really decreasing the effectiveness of this as a preventative measure for decreasing the number of cases that we see.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions up here or comments to either the town manager or Charles, thank you, Charles, for being on. I think, Gary, you're going to take some of the concerns and questions from the dialogue tonight, and please share any recommendations or possible recommendations to any of us on the council. Obviously, we're up here representing not only ourselves up here, but we are representing the entire town of Weathersfield with that, similar to what Charles is doing as the director for Central Connecticut Health District. So please take some of the concerns and questions that were brought up and relay any further guidance that you want to provide for this to us, and maybe come up with a decision that both takes in some of what we've said and what Charles and you believe should be paramount to us, decreasing our number and reversing this trend of increased cases.
Yep, we'll do. We'll get something out to the council and also some clear communication to the general public so that they're aware.
Okay. Well, before I do a motion to adjourn, I want to recognize EOC Director and our Fire Marshal, Anthony Dignati, who probably has not had a full night's sleep in the last 24 or 48 hours. Thank you for your efforts this weekend. Hurricane Henri was hyped up to be one of the bigger Category 1 hurricanes hitting landfall, but it did decrease to a tropical storm. So we kind of dodged a bullet, unlike what we faced last year in August and earlier this summer with those two hurricanes. But hats off to not only you, Anthony, and to Karen, as well as the entire EOC team, the police, as well as Chief Bailey and the fire department for responding to a number of calls for trees and wires, trees down, flooding, some minor flooding in basements, not as bad as earlier in the summer. So hats off to you and your team. Thank you again. Thank you, Mayor. And if I can get a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we are adjourned. Oh, all those in favor signify by saying, not yet. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody want to abstain from that one?